What causes chronic fatigue syndrome? Well, it's different for different people. What we do tend to see over the years of working with people from all around the world in 60 countries is that chronic fatigue syndrome is usually a multi-faceted illness, in the sense that it's usually never just one thing that created the chronic fatigue syndrome. For instance, 70% of patients that we see usually had some form of virus or infection in the lead up to getting chronic fatigue syndrome. Things like glandular fever, mono, a Ross River fever, things of that nature. Now, it can be said for long COVID, obviously people who experienced COVID and then they didn't recover from that, which then became long COVID. We also see there's usually a correlation between either physical and emotional stress coupled with a virus. So this could mean on a physical sense when, somebody's pushing themselves beyond their, normal capacity for a long period of time. And basically what happens is the body and the brain can't handle the load, the adaptation or the response to the load. And couple that with a virus like glandular fever or something like COVID, basically the brain and the body shut down. And this is the most common experience that we see with people. Now, other factors can be past trauma. It can also be environmental stress and toxins. So things like mold, certain environments and chemicals that people have been exposed to can also be a factor in developing chronic fatigue syndrome. But usually it's a recipe, and it's a recipe of like 2 to 3, sometimes 4 things that coupled together, became the recipe for the diagnosis of chronic fatigue syndrome. What we do know is that chronic fatigue syndrome affects the entire person's life. Not only does it affect their body, it affects their brain, it affects their immune system, it affects their nervous system, it affects their emotional well-being, and I think that's often not talked about. And, one of the hardest parts about chronic fatigue syndrome is the fact that the outside world or society at large don't really believe in it. There's a little bit more understanding now since long COVID has come about. But typically the response for someone who doesn't understand it, they'll say, well, isn't chronic fatigue syndrome just all in your head? Isn't it just like they're just lazy people? And that couldn't be further from the truth. We've never met a lazy person with chronic fatigue syndrome, and we've literally worked with thousands of people around the world. But, and there's a big but here, you have to factor in that it really does affect the emotional and spiritual sense of oneself. The way I explain it to people who don't understand it, I say, well, imagine that, you do all these wonderful things, you go for your 1-hour bike ride every day, and then you go to work, and then you go and see your friends in the afternoon, and you do all of that, and that's who you are. And then all of a sudden, you literally can't do anything that you used to be able to do. The carpet is pulled from underneath your feet. How would that feel? And they go, oh, that would be terrible. And I said, well, that's what someone with chronic fatigue syndrome is experiencing, because what they're going through right now is they're mourning their old life because they can't do what they were able to do once so easily. And so you can imagine the effect this can have on the emotional well-being of oneself, and then the spiritual part of you who just wishes and wants to be able to do whatever they want whenever they want. There is hope. People can get better from chronic fatigue syndrome. We see it in our practice all the time. People who have been severely bedbound. We've seen people who are moderately affected. And then people who are high functioning but have still been suffering. We have seen all different severity types, all different ages, from as young as 8 all the way up to 85, get better, get healthy, and start living again. I hope this video was informative and helpful, and we'll see you very soon. Bye for now.